All right, I think we're live. I think we're ready to get going here on another fine Tuesday. See who all we have on right now. Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Got to start that off for those that will join us later. And for those of you who are on right now, Hunter 5657, good to have you. Ethan P as well. See where Ohio State's ranked going into tonight. Emperor of Rome and DM, good to have you guys both. So happy to have both of you. Always enjoy hearing from you. And once again, thank you for all of your support. Jeff Wilson, Don Tron Plays, Brandon Franklin, what's going on? It's been a while. So happy to have you. Being a Giants fan is hard. Stephen Edwards, what's going on? Grayson B, what is going on? And you're right, Texas will not be ranked. All right, guys. So once again, good to have you. And I know we'll have a lot more people coming in later tonight, and then, of course, after the stream is over. So the big questions I want to address is before we start dumping into these rankings here in about 5 minutes or so is I want to know, first off, where is the committee going to drop Minnesota and Baylor after tonight? You know, after both of those teams that were undefeated last week, they both lost. Where will the committee take them after that? Because, you know, both of them were narrow losses. Baylor losing by 3 and Minnesota only losing by 4 on the road to Iowa. So I'm curious to see where the committee ranks them. They have not been very kind to Baylor as of late. And I think blowing a 28-3 lead at home, they're probably going to drop a little bit further, saying they should have won that game. And, you know, we had them at 13. They didn't. They had a chance to prove us wrong, and they didn't. So we're gonna make it life even worse on them. So very curious to see that. Curious to see where Oklahoma jumps. Will the Sooners rise fairly high after their win over Baylor, where they were down? You know, that goes both ways. You know, you look at it and say, yeah, it's great that Oklahoma came back from 28-3, but they were also down 28-3. You know, they were also down by 25 points. So great they came back. They got the win. That's what matters the most. But obviously a cause of concern for the Sooners. So a couple questions there, and we'll jump onto those here in a second before I elaborate more. Emperor of Rome, yeah, I guess he's not a moderator. I guess he has not. Cyclone Mitch, would you care to be a moderator? That is the question. Emperor of Rome was our first ever moderator, and I trust his judgment more than anybody when it comes to this. He says yes. So everybody, you've witnessed history. Cyclone Mitch, as of today, has just been made a moderator to the Gridiron Expert. So Cyclone Mitch, congratulations. Once again, you, alongside Emperor of Rome, alongside DM, alongside many of other of you guys have been some of the best out there. Most consistent viewers, supporters, commenters, everything. So very, very well-deserved title for you, Mr. Cyclone Mitch. And Iowa State has a very good chance of being ranked today. I don't have them ranked in our top 25 that we released yesterday. But for me, they were right on the outside looking in. I don't think they need to be in there right now, but the win over Texas looks very good on their resume, even though Texas is the most disappointing team in the entire country. Let's put it like that. So let's take a look at some of the other comments that we're getting right now. I mentioned what I want to see. I want to see what they have out of Minnesota, Baylor, Oklahoma. I am curious to see. I didn't have Iowa ranked last week. Going into that game against Minnesota, and I know the committee did. So will the committee move Iowa up maybe into the top 15 by the end of tonight? I am curious to see how that will happen. I'm curious to see if Alabama drops any. And before we get started on that, because I know, look, the past few weeks, guys, the committee has done a horrible job. I think most of us can agree with that. They have not done a very good job and haven't really seemed to figure out what's important to them. You know, in previous years, it's been strength of schedule or it's been quality wins. Sometimes it's been margin of victory. What is important to this committee? That's something that we haven't figured out or really found out yet. They just haven't made that clear to us. So I'm very interested to see if we can get any source of that by the end of tonight. And Cyclone Mitch, I agree with you. I don't think Alabama should drop and will drop regarding the Tua injury because, as I mentioned when we released my top 25, and I'll mention it again here, the committee is not supposed to look ahead. They're not supposed to look ahead. And Alabama beat Mississippi State 38-7, which you should know is more than LSU beat Mississippi State under the same circumstances. So I have Alabama. Actually, I'll tell you what, my top 6 from last week, and I see Mr. Cannoli, you have LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia as your top 4. I agree. And you've got Utah, Oregon at 5 and 6. I've actually got Bama at 5, Oregon at 6. I don't believe that they need to be dropped any. Committee shouldn't look ahead. If Alabama, we know Alabama's going to win this week. I think they're playing Western Carolina. If they beat Auburn on the road and take care of business, annihilate them the way they probably would have done with Tua, then their playoff hopes are still intact and they shouldn't get punished for it. You can't punish a team for injuries. You can't help that. It's not Alabama's fault he got hurt. So Emperor Rome, I agree. They should not drop. Ethan P., your dream is to be a commentator? Well, hey, man, so is mine, and we're working our way towards it. You've got a lot of enthusiasm for your Buckeyes, I know. So you start young and you work way. If you start there, Ethan, you're going to be starting lower and younger than I did getting into this type of field. So you do that and continue to get better and work your way up every single day. Absolutely can happen, 100%. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You're going to have a lot of haters out there, but you're also going to have a lot of supporters and a lot of people that are going to help you get to where you are. So start young and keep working your way up, and it's going to happen. All right, so we're about to get going here. We got my man Reese Davis up on the screen talking about Oregon, Utah, and Oklahoma. Obviously, very interesting here. And after these rankings are released, we'll have an idea of kind of what we're going into with Week 13. And I do want to break down some of the scenarios that we might be hit with by the end of the next week. So in 2 weeks, when rivalry week is over, some of the scenarios we might be looking at as we approach conference championship weekend. So something to keep an eye on. We'll address that once we get these rankings and breaking those down for you guys. Comic Dude 45, I am. I am doing No Shave November, at least for right now. So I don't know if I like it. Probably not going to keep it, but I had to do it for the month. You know, I had to do it up here at school. We got a lot of people doing it. Had my quad mates. We all decided to do it. So here we are, No Shave November on November 19th. And we're 11 days away from the end of the month. And part of me is really excited for it. And part of me is like, I don't care. Maybe I'll keep it. Maybe I'll keep it going. We'll see. We're going to play it by ear. But yes, we are doing it. Let's see. Uncle Luke, you're in the 8th grade. I'm dreaming to be a sports broadcaster and basically broadcasting every sport out there. So, hey, like I was telling Ethan earlier, it's extremely possible, man. Don't let anybody tell you can't. That's for everybody out there. I don't even care what your passion is or what your career is. If that's what you want to do, then don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. You know, people will. They'll probably try to deter you from that, but don't let them do it. Do not let them do it. Keep pushing forward and keep pursuing your dreams. That sounds cliche, but it's the truth. So Uncle Luke and Ethan, the two of you that mentioned that, just keep it going, guys. Got a lot of faith in you. Uncle Luke, I have seen some of your videos, man. So keep it up. Keep it up. Cyclone Mitch, Grid's going to be the next Chris Fowler. I don't know about that. I don't know. That would be joining some pretty good company. I can tell you that. Emperor of Rome, you like your beer. Comic Dude 45, you don't like yours, but a bet is a bet. And that's why I am too. I gotta honor my word. You don't want to be the guy that backs out on the bet. You know, if someone else does it first, okay, then all bets are off. No pun intended. But you gotta honor at least until the end, or at least until someone else breaks it. Brandon Franklin, how do I feel about Nebraska extending Scott Frost? That's a very, very interesting comment. An interesting storyline that no one really talked about. I don't know why they did it, but I think they're seeing something that obviously maybe we aren't. This year for Nebraska was extremely, extremely disappointing. One of the most disappointing teams in the country, in my opinion. Some people really bought into the hype, including myself. I probably bit a little too hard into that. Some people didn't. I don't know if I would have extended him, though. As Cyclone Mitch just said, why would you extend a guy who's only won 8 games? Why would you extend a guy that's only won 8 games? So I don't really know why they did that. They still have the chance to go to bowling, so I think he really needs that to go. 4-8, maybe 2 years in a row, or then 4-8 to 5-7, yeah, you improve, but that's not the standard of Nebraska football that these Cornhusker fans want. So I'm very interested to see how he does next year, because he's not going anywhere this year, so I'm curious to see where he goes next year. Emperor of Rome, your beard is not the result of a bet. Hey, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. One time I did have a beard going. I had it going in the summer, and that wasn't the result of a bet. And then I had enough people come up to me, and they said, God, you look horrible. And so I said, okay. I'll back off. And I had to shave the thing. And it was getting a little hot, too, in the summer heat. But all right, enough of the beard talk. Let's get into the rankings. They just released it, and we've got 2 new people. Look at that, Cyclone Mitch. He is ranked. Iowa State is ranked at 22nd as a 6-4 team, I should add. So very interesting there. SMU at 25, App State 24, USC at 23, and Oklahoma State at 21, which is exactly where we had them in our rankings just the other day. So interesting to see that we do have those 2 group of 5 schools there with App State and SMU. All right, Boise coming in at 20th. I find it very interesting that Auburn has not dropped out of the top 15 yet. That is a shocker to me. But Boise there, Cincinnati dropping 2 spots, and Memphis above them, which is exactly what we had. I told you that I think Memphis is the best group of 5 team in the country right now, and they're certainly playing like it. That's why they get the nod over Cincinnati. Iowa in at 17, and Notre Dame in at 16. And to me, that is a little low. I look at Notre Dame right now, and I say, guys, come on. I know it was Navy, but they annihilated Navy. For 52-20, and Navy was a ranked team last week. So surprised to see Notre Dame not even move, sticking at 16th. Minnesota still in the top 10. Now that's interesting. That's the first take we're going to get from 11 to 15. Auburn coming in at 15th, dropping 3 spots. Baylor only dropping 1 from the committee. Actually having them at 14, which is where I had them. So we got Michigan coming in at 13, Wisconsin at 12, and Florida at 11. And which obviously means that you got Oklahoma should be higher than 10th. We know that Florida dropping out or still at 11. We had them in our top 10. So they're in 11, Wisconsin at 12, Michigan 13. Obviously honoring that head-to-head there. These rankings, I'm going to say right off the bat, a little bit better. I'm not seeing too many discrepancies. I'm surprised to see Iowa State in there. I'm surprised to see USC in there. We got Minnesota only dropping 2 to 10th. And I don't like that too much. Nothing to dog on the Golden Gophers, but you're looking at a team that did lose by 4 points to Iowa on the road. Tough place to play. Iowa not a bad team. But Minnesota only dropping 2 spots and remaining in the top 10. What that tells me is that if they win out, that they are absolutely playoff contenders, and if, of course, win out with a win over Ohio State, that would propel them into the college football playoff despite the fairly weak schedule. Penn State up another spot to 8th. We had them at 10th. We had Oklahoma at 9th. So we had Penn State 2 spots below Oklahoma. The committee likes Penn State above them. Oklahoma, though, going on the road and beating Baylor. Penn State only barely surviving Indiana, who was a 7-3 team at the time. Utah coming in at 7, exactly where we had them, and which would make me believe that when they're about to break down the top 4 here, or the top 6 for that matter, it's probably not going to change. I do not think that's going to change that much. So Utah coming in at 7, they're going to talk here in a second, and then they'll break down our top 6 teams. So initial reaction coming from this. Obviously, we have agreed a little bit with the committee thus far. We have a couple of rankings that we agreed with. We had Oklahoma State at 21, Baylor at 14, and Utah at 7. A couple other rankings here and there that we were just a game or a rank or 2 off. But I don't like Minnesota at 10th. If you go back and watch that Minnesota game against Iowa, once again, not to dog on the Golden Gophers, but you go back and watch that Minnesota game against Iowa, they struggled. That passing attack from Tanner Morgan was nothing. Nothing compared to what it was against Penn State. They looked phenomenal against Penn State, and they just couldn't do it against Iowa in that stingy defense. The running game couldn't get anything going after Iowa allowed 250 yards to Jonathan Taylor. So Minnesota keeping it, once again, what that tells me is that we could be shaping up for a top 12 or maybe even top 10, depending on what happens, showdown between Minnesota and Wisconsin in the season finale. Minnesota gets into the Big Ten championship, let's say. That means Minnesota is at least the 7th or 8th ranked team in the country, I would say. You beat Ohio State, Minnesota's in, despite the one loss to Iowa. Not a bad loss, but once again, strength of schedule, it's not there. Same could be said for Baylor, once again, sitting at 14. I would have loved to have seen where the committee would have ranked them had they beaten Oklahoma. But Baylor's only loss to Oklahoma is to Oklahoma, and a good one. If Baylor wins out and beats Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship, you have to start thinking, all right, and then Minnesota does the same. Who gets in? Who gets in between those two schools? So interesting to see from the committee there. Coming in here, top 6, LSU at number 1, as we figured it would be. Many thought there was a chance that the Tigers could drop a spot after their pretty abysmal performance against Ole Miss. Ohio State coming in at number 2, no surprise once again. Once again, I don't think there should have been any change in the top 4. And again, we still have 4 more spots to go in these top 6, but I just don't see why or how you could justify any change. Clemson in at 3, once again, not a surprise where we had them. I would presume 4 would be Georgia. After their win over Auburn on the road by 7 points, a game which they led 21-0. So coming in here in a second, we should have the final 4, 5, and 6. We got Jeff Wilson. Y'all's TVs are all way ahead of us. I got that stupid YouTube TV streaming, which means we've got Georgia at number 4. Alabama would be 5, I would presume, and then we've got Oregon at 6. So once again, the top 7 did not change, and that's exactly what we had in our top 25, and that's exactly how it needs to be. So for the first time this season, everybody, the committee, for the most part, got it right. For the first time this season, the committee seems to have got it right. All right, so let them talk, and now it's time for us to talk. Legalized Quack, good to have you. It's been a while. But here we go. Top 6 shouldn't have changed, and he's exactly right. For that matter, it's top 7, and they didn't change. LSU all the way down to Utah, 1 through 7, did not change, and they didn't need to change. I know Ethan and a bunch of our other Ohio State fans out there think the Buckeyes need to be ranked ahead. But as Comic Dude would quickly point out, and as DM, of course, would quickly point out, Rutgers did put up 21 points on Ohio State. And that was the most Ohio State that had allowed to any team since Florida Atlantic in the season opener. And again, that was probably against second-string and third-string defense for the Scarlet Knights. Regardless, they allowed 21 to Rutgers. LSU allowed 37 and over 400 rushing yards to Ole Miss. But to me, you're still looking at it. We knew LSU was going to beat Ole Miss. We knew Ohio State was going to beat Rutgers. So now you're looking at it as, once again, a complete body of work, complete resume. And LSU still owns the edge over Ohio State when it comes to that. That's, to me, fact of the matter. So LSU there. Clemson deserves to stay at 3. Georgia at 4 to win over Auburn. And I'm glad the committee did not move Alabama. There was a lot of talk coming into this week that the committee might drop them, and saying that Bama might drop from 5th to 6th or 5th to 7th because of the Tua Tagovailoa injury. And I'm glad that they decided not to do that. I'm glad that the committee decided to keep them at 5 where they deserve to be. Now, will they make the playoff? More than likely not. Just by the way things are looking at it. LSU, Ohio State, and Clemson run the table. You've got 1 spot left for that 4, and I think that would more than likely go to the 1-loss Pac-12 champion in Oregon or Utah, or maybe even Oklahoma could be in the mix as well. So I look at that. Top 7 is fine. Penn State at 8, Oklahoma at 9, and Minnesota at 10. Not a big deal. Emperor of Rome, I do see your comment. And Johnny Bays, I'm getting to you because I was about to get to that with Notre Dame. I know that's what you're upset about. I am appalled that Notre Dame is 16th in the country. I am appalled that they are that low. Behind the likes of Auburn and maybe Baylor, maybe Michigan. Well, Michigan, they deserve to be behind because of head-to-head, but certainly behind Auburn, because here's the way I like to look at it, and I hate to say it. I hate to say it, but here's the thing. You know it. whether you want to say it or not, you do know it, and I know it. The AP poll and the College Football Playoff Committee is just the slightest bit biased. Just a little bit. Anybody can say they're not, but they are. That's the fact of the matter. And what I have right here is I'm circling this Auburn rank at 15, even though they only lost by 7 to Georgia. Once again, the eye test doesn't do anything. If you didn't watch any of that game between Auburn and Georgia, if you didn't watch it single down, you'd look at it and be like, wow, that was a close game. Georgia won by 7. You wouldn't know that Georgia led by 21 points at one point and obviously nearly collapsed in the fourth quarter, but was up by 21 and basically dominated that game from start to finish and ended up closing out the Tigers, even though they had opportunities to tie. Auburn only dropping a couple spots to 15th and staying above Notre Dame, who beat Navy, who was ranked number 23, by 32 points. I don't know why Notre Dame is not there. I had Auburn all the way down at 20th, and I think that's where they belong. Where's their eye test? Is the win against Oregon holding that much stock? Is their win for Auburn, is that win over Oregon in the beginning of the season, is that holding that much stock this late into the season? Oregon's 6th in the country, rightfully so. But is that why Auburn, a 3-loss team, is above a 2-loss Notre Dame or above an Iowa team that just beat a top 10 team in Minnesota? That doesn't make any sense to me. Because once again, who has Auburn beat outside of Oregon? Texas A&M? The committee didn't even rank them. They're one of the highest teams in the country. I thought Texas A&M was going to get ranked in the top 25 here. And instead, they went with USC and Iowa State. Nothing against those two programs. But Texas A&M and Virginia Tech were both 7-3, while each of those schools each have 4 losses. I find that very, very interesting. Very interesting. Doesn't make much sense in my opinion. Notre Dame struggles against Navy, fine. You beat them by 32. You should have moved up at least a spot in the rankings and not stayed the same. So that is a big issue I have. Emperor of Rome, I saw your comment about Michigan. The committee has them at 13. I had them at 11. So even I don't think they deserve to be a top 10 team, but I do believe they're clicking at the right time. And I do believe that they're going to give a fairly close game, or not close, but a better challenge to Ohio State than people thought they would have maybe 3 weeks ago. Since that second half of the Penn State game, Michigan has turned it on offensively. They narrowly lost to Penn State. They annihilated Maryland. They annihilated Michigan State. The offense is grooving right now. They finally figured it out from an offensive standpoint that way they were getting criticized earlier this season. So credit to Jim Harbaugh and Gaddis and everybody on that staff that are finally making the changes necessary to make Michigan competitive. They're at 13. We had them at 11. Not top 10 in my opinion, but right on the outside looking in. I'm going to make sure to get to a lot of viewer comments here in a second, guys, so don't worry about that. We will address as many as possible after we finish breaking down these set of rankings, because that's only a bit of these live streams. And after that, we want to hear your questions and your comments. But I'm looking here also, and one of the things that I like, I'm circling it again so I can come back to it, is Memphis finally jumping Cincinnati, which we had. We had Memphis as high as 16 and Cincinnati at 17. Committee has them at 18, Cincinnati at 19. Okay, not a big deal. But regardless, the point is Memphis is now the highest ranked group of 5 teams, and rightfully so. Memphis is taking care of business. They're beating these teams handily. Cincinnati struggling. Narrowly beat South Florida. Narrowly beat Eastern Carolina or East Carolina. So you're looking at the margin of victory, which some say the committee doesn't look at, but we all know that they do. And I looked at that as a win for Memphis, who still has to play Cincinnati. Right now, that these rankings don't mean anything because they're going to have to face off against each other in the end, and the loser of that is out. We know that. We know the loser of Cincinnati and Memphis is out of a New Year's Six bowl race. So the fact that their ranks are so close to each other, it probably doesn't matter. Because one of them is going to lose, and that loser's out, and the winner will probably clinch it. But that is something to keep your eye on. The committee does feel that Memphis is a little bit better than Cincinnati right now, as did we when we released ours yesterday. I firmly agree with that. And then finally, SMU cracks the rankings once again, should never have dropped out in the first place. SMU should have never left the rankings in the first place. Appalachian State at 24, so still in the top 25. Miracles do happen. And then you have Iowa State and USC, 22 and 23. Iowa State coming off that win against Texas, which propelled them into the top 25. I don't know if I would have put a 4-loss Iowa State team in there right now. coming in there is a good win, 2-point win over Texas, something that we did think would happen. But I am surprised to see Iowa State and USC both in these top 25 right now. More so, Johnny Bays, as you said, not Virginia Tech, not Texas A&M. Indiana doesn't deserve to be. They're 7-3 right now. They had their chance to beat Penn State, didn't do it. So I couldn't justify putting Indiana in there. Couldn't see the committee justify putting Indiana in there, but not putting Virginia Tech or A&M, I do think that's very interesting. I do think that's very, very interesting. And Legalized Quack, you're right. They do have a win over Utah, sure. USC does. But they have a couple of disappointing losses in there as well. The win over Utah is good. And I guess that's what's holding a lot of stock for USC right now. Same can be said for Auburn, with that win over Oregon holding a bunch of stock. But I don't know if I fully agree with that. I don't think a 4-loss team should be ranked in this set of top 25. Maybe at the end of the season, you've got a couple 8-4 teams sprinkled in there. I understand. But as of right now, a 4-loss team does not deserve to be in the top 25. But they are. There's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about it. So I'm going to get to some of your questions and comments. But once again, if you've watched the past 2 live streams, I've been up here ranting and yelling, screaming, and voicing my frustration with the committee. And finally, 3 weeks in, it feels that they have somewhat figured it out. Now, it's not perfect. Plenty of discrepancies, but none as big as we've had in recent weeks with the likes of Baylor or Minnesota or Oklahoma or Florida. Anybody there that maybe should have been ranked too high or was ranked too low. So finally, it seems that we're working towards the right direction. Let's pray it stays that way and that this isn't just a fluke. So having said that, not as much to talk about with these rankings. We've kind of given you our 2 cents. Let's go and take it to you guys. I'm going to scroll back up in the chat, and I want to hear what you guys have to say. So we're just going to find out where we're starting here. Don Tron plays. You believe Florida should be above Minnesota. I had Florida at 9th. I had Minnesota at 13th. So I do believe Florida should be above Minnesota. Minnesota is just that one weird team in the college football playoff rankings right now, where you look at it and you say, yeah, sitting at number 10 in the country, they're still playoff contenders because they could beat Wisconsin. That's a quality win. And they could maybe beat Ohio State, assuming they don't lose to Penn State, in which case it would be beating Penn State again. But outside of a few of those games, really outside of the Penn State game, Minnesota hasn't beaten anybody. Their first true road test, they lost to Iowa. Everybody else has been a very bad or below average Big Ten team or a weaker Group of 5 team that they struggled against every single time. Barely beat South Dakota State, barely beat Fresno State, barely beat Georgia Southern. So I do find it odd that the committee thought that Minnesota deserved to stay in the top 10, only dropping 2 spots. I would have dropped them out and maybe put a team like, as Emperor Rome said, maybe Michigan in. But they did not. You can't really justify putting, if you're basing it off of head-to-head, Wisconsin below Michigan. Now, I think you can. I know that's head-to-head, and they're trying to honor head-to-head, but you know what? Upsets happen. I'll give you a good example. And I know it's very broad. I know it's a very broad example, but Arkansas's 44-point underdogs to LSU this weekend. If Arkansas somehow pulled off that upset, are we going to say they're better than LSU and deserve to be ranked ahead of them? Or if they were ranked, or if say Arkansas was a 4-loss team right now, ranked 22nd where Iowa State is, LSU's number 1, and Arkansas beats LSU in Death Valley. Is Arkansas ahead of LSU because of head-to-head? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So you don't have to honor head-to-head in some cases. You don't have, and obviously the example you look at it, Oregon right now is above Auburn, but Oregon's a 1-loss team, Auburn's a 2-loss team. Things do change, but I don't know. I think I could justify putting Michigan above Wisconsin. Emperor Rome throwing out some interesting substitutes for expletive. Gosh diddly darn it, and golly gee willikers. I feel like I'm stepping back in time a little bit. All right, Jeff Wilson. Do I think Clemson could beat LSU, Alabama, Ohio State, or Georgia? I think they could beat some, and I think they'd lose to others. But I will say this. Clemson is playing some of the best football in the country right now. And I get it might be against what many will say is weaker opponents, not as elite opponents. I get that. But Clemson is playing against some of the best, or playing some of the solid football in the country right now. They're blowing teams out of the water. They're not playing to the level of their competition. They're annihilating teams like NC State and Wake Forest. I would expect Clemson to annihilate South Carolina here in a few weeks. So this Clemson team this year reminds me a lot of Clemson last year. Their best win so far is probably Texas A&M. And people were criticizing their strength of schedule. Oh, they haven't beaten anybody. They haven't played anybody. They're gonna struggle in the college football playoff. That's not the case. If anything, they're gonna be well rested. And that's exactly what happened last year. They annihilated Notre Dame and they went on to beat Alabama. I'm not saying they could do that again, but Clemson, the way they are playing, compared to what we saw earlier in the season, kind of sluggish, not looking like their number one selves, they're looking extremely well. So, Jeff, I think Clemson could beat. I think they could beat Alabama. I think if LSU doesn't straighten up their defense, I think they could beat LSU. I don't know if they could beat Ohio State, as I do feel Ohio State is the most complete team in the country, most sound team in the country. And I do think they could beat Georgia, because I don't think Georgia's offense has enough to keep up with Clemson offense. I think it's into a shootout. Georgia can't keep up. They can't keep up. That's just fact of the matter. Clemson's defense is extremely underrated. No one talks about them, but they are extremely, extremely good. All right, rest of the comments here. Comic Dude 45, Oklahoma be like they had us in the first half. Not gonna lie. No, it's exactly right. 28-3. Good God. I think a lot of people may have turned off their TV sets at that point. But yeah, had him in the first half. Not gonna lie. And then Jalen Hurts came alive. And that's something I want to touch on for a second. That was so heartbreaking for me. I'm not an Oklahoma fan. I'm not a Baylor fan. But as a fan, to watch Baylor and this program that went, and not to take away from anything, but they were 1-11 2 years ago, were undefeated, had Oklahoma down 28-3. Looked like they're going to run away with this game and show that they were playoff contenders. They were going to make a statement win. And then when it was all said and done, Oklahoma won the game. And they're jumping, they're celebrating, and they're freaking out, as they should. What a comeback. And then you see Baylor, in the end zone, singing. I don't know I don't know their all tradition. What was it? Their alma mater or their fight song or something they do. And they're holding their bear claws up like that. And they zoom in on Matt Rule's face, and it's just expressionless. He's not crying. He's not excited. Obviously, he's just kind of expressionless. And I just think, God, how heartbreaking to know you were up by 25 points. But as heartbreaking as it is, credit to Baylor for just sticking to a tradition. Win or lose, we are going to do this. Credit to the fans for doing it. They're not going to boo them. They're going to do it. Because the team that went 1-11 2 years ago had the chance to finish 11-1 this year. You flipped those records. And that's something that not many teams can say they did or can even do. So credit to them. But that was the one scene from this past week of college football that has really caught my eye. And it was just like, man, that's so tough. But at the same time, that's just the beauty that is college football. Kale J, make a way too early championship prediction. Look, if I'm making my prediction, Kale, here's what I'm looking at. I don't think LSU loses the remainder of the season. I don't think Ohio State loses the remainder of the season. And I don't think Clemson loses the remainder of the season. So right there's your lot. Those are your top three teams. And I don't think those rankings change unless maybe someone has a lackluster performance down the road. So LSU's 1, Ohio State's 2, Clemson's 3. So Ohio State would play Clemson. And then you've got to figure out who gets that 4th spot. Who gets in 4? If LSU beats Georgia, Georgia's out. Then you've got potentially a one-loss Pac-12 champion, Oregon or Utah. And these are some of those scenarios we were mentioning at the beginning of the live stream. So you've got a one-loss Bama without Tua, who didn't win their division or their conference. You've got a one-loss Oregon or Utah, assuming they don't lose again. One-loss Oregon or Utah Pac-12 champion. And you might have a one-loss Oklahoma team. Or one-loss Baylor team, although I don't think the committee has given them enough respect in the past for them to say, okay, if Baylor wins out and beats Oklahoma in a revenge game, that sitting at 11-1, they could maybe slip into the playoff. I don't think that's going to happen for Baylor. So really, it's a battle between Alabama, and let's just for the sake of this argument say Oregon, Alabama, Oregon, or Oklahoma. Oklahoma did it last year. Lost once, won out, won the Big 12 championship over Baylor. Texas, good Lord. Texas, the only team that beat them in the regular season, got the revenge over them, and then wins the playoff. In this scenario, I think you have to give it to Oregon. They're playing extremely sound football. Their only losses come to Auburn, who the committee still believes to be the 15th ranked team in the country. All of their losses would come to quality teams. Auburn's would have. It would have been Alabama, would have been LSU, would have been Florida, and it would have been, just blanked on the other one, Georgia. So those are their 4 losses, all quality opponents, all top 10, 15 opponents. So I think if Oregon wins out, and that would include a win over a 7th or 6th ranked Utah team in the Pac-12 championship, you have to stick them in if you're weighing the 1 losses. And really, if the committee is looking at it from a loss standpoint of we've got all these 1-loss teams here, who they all lost to. Alabama's loss came to LSU, Oregon's came to Auburn, Oklahoma's came to Kansas State. And when you're looking at that, Oklahoma has the worst loss out of all 3 of those teams. So I think you can eliminate Oklahoma. So now it's down to Alabama and Oregon, and there's bias from the committee. Yes. SEC bias at times. Yes. But as biased as they could be, I don't know if they're going to want Alabama in there without Tua Tagovailoa. That's wrong. If Alabama certainly deserves to be in, absolutely. But they are biased. But for me, if I was on the committee, I would, for you Alabama fans out there, for Emperor Frame, I'm sorry. If it came down to Alabama or Oregon, a 1-loss Pac-12 champion, I would stick in the Ducks. I would have to. So, Kale, to answer your question, that would make it LSU, Oregon, Ohio State, Clemson. I'm looking at an LSU, Ohio State national championship game. And then after that, I don't know. But you said make a way too early championship prediction. My championship prediction, LSU, Ohio State as of right now. But LSU has to fix their defense. That's first and foremost. All right, scrolling through the rest of the comments, we are slowly making progress here, making our way down the list. Cyclone Mitch can't believe Iowa State's in. Neither can I. But rightfully so. Iowa State, Cyclone Mitch, they were a good team. They are a good team that I said repeatedly would probably be the 3rd best team in the Big 12 this season, behind Oklahoma and Texas. I don't think many saw Baylor kind of doing what they did this year. But when you look at their losses, a narrow one to Oklahoma, a narrow one to Iowa. They did go on. They did stay home and beat Texas. When you look at their losses and the wins that they have, you can't help but wonder what could have been had they beat Oklahoma, had they beat Iowa, teams like that. Had they beat Baylor, who they only lost to by 2 points, and were leading by 1 point late in that game. So a lot of narrow losses in there for Iowa State. Had they won those, could be a completely different season. But I think the committee recognizes that. I think they realize the talent that this team has. And then the win over Texas, who they ranked way too high last week at 19, was enough to justify putting them in. So while I don't think they should be in, I know you're shocked. I can understand why. Yeah, Johnny Bays, fantastic question. I'd love to know what the committee uses as criteria. Margin of victory seems to be incredibly important despite the opponent. And Johnny, you and I have talked about that in some comment sections on some previous videos. Once again, I said at the beginning of this stream, and I'll say it again, this is the first time that I think we've come across a committee that doesn't have a set of criteria. At least they haven't vocalized that. What is it? Previous it's been quality of wins, strength of schedule, winning on the road, obviously looking better than maybe winning at home. Maybe for some it has been margin of victory or margin of loss. Sure, you lost, but it was by 2 points. What is this committee looking for? What is important to them? I think that's something that we don't know. Something we've yet to figure out, and something that needs to change, something that we do need to figure out, but we won't until they tell us. This has been very inconsistent. This is the first week I think they've gotten it right, but I agree, margin of victory does seem important, just regardless of who you're playing, regardless of if it's a top 5 opponent or if it's a team out of the FCS. I think that seems to be very important to them. All right. Emperor of Rome, I want to give a shout out to the only winless team in college football, the 0-10 Akron Zips. So congratulations to the Zips. They have a very good chance of finishing 0-12, and would join just a very select few of teams to ever do that in FBS history. So, as Johnny Bays says, go Zips. Go Zips. I don't know if I'm rooting for him to get a win or if I'm rooting for him to lose out. I can't decide. Corey Barber, we just made that prediction. Right now, I'd say my final four would be LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oregon. That's not my top four right now. That's not how I think they should be ranked. That's what I think they should be when the season ends. People always seem to, it goes one ear in one ear and out the other. They don't seem to listen to the whole sentence. So that's not how I'd rank them now. But in the end, I think I would have LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oregon. That is what I would put in right as of right now. Alex, kid, awesome. Good to have you. It's been a while since we've had you on the stream or seen some comments for you, so happy to have you here. I don't know how USC is ranked. They do have that win over Utah, as we mentioned earlier, and that is maybe holding a lot of stock for them. Like as we mentioned, very similar to Auburn and their win over Oregon. And USC has had some decent wins this year, but Utah by far their best. So, and in a narrow one to Notre Dame. So maybe the committees, one thing we're picking up on is maybe narrow losses plays a role. There's no such thing as a moral victory. I don't really firmly believe in that, but maybe narrow losses is something that matters to them. So I don't know how. I don't agree that they should be above Appalachian State or SMU. I think USC is the type of team that maybe should have just slipped in at 25. SMU should have never dropped out, guys. I hate to say it. They lose to Memphis. They allow a lot of points to ECU, and okay, we're booting you? Come on. That's ridiculous. Only reason they put SMU back in, if you ask me, is because they didn't even play this past week. The only reason I think they put them in is because they have a huge game up against Navy, and they know that if SMU beats Navy, they're going to rise higher in the rankings. We know Memphis or Cincinnati is going to lose, which is going to help SMU's case even more, which is going to make the American Athletic Conference Championship game look even better if you've got a ranked SMU team in it. Hate to say it, but you talk about thinking ahead. The committee does it. They just don't do it for the right reasons. And we are almost caught up here on these comments, and I'm enjoying every single one of them. Enjoy hearing what you guys have to say. Let me try to cut back up here. DM, once again, good to hear from you. Glad to have you on the live stream with us tonight. Hope you're still on with us. I love the question. I know you've emailed this to me before. My way too early thoughts on North Dakota State playing Oregon next year. And it's a funny question just to talk about, obviously looking ahead, and we're sticking on that topic. North Dakota State, as we all know, guys, is a team out of the FCS that has thrived under recent years, winning, 5 of the past 6 or 6 of the past 7 FCS national championships. And all I'm saying is that North Dakota State has pulled off a handful of upsets over quality FBS teams before. It's happened before, and it will happen again. Now, DM, I don't know what's going to happen against Oregon next year, but all I can say is this. The Oregon team we are seeing now at number 6 in the country and potentially a college football playoff team will not be the same Oregon team we see in 2020. They're going to lose a lot of talent. They're going, and namely Justin Herbert at quarterback. We know they're going to lose a lot of key players at the conclusion of 2019, which means that when 2020 opens up, they're going to have a lot of key replacements, a lot of new players, new faces to try to come in and keep Oregon in as Pac-12 title contenders and playoff contenders. And we have seen before teams that struggle in the first week or first 2 weeks of the season because they're trying to find their rhythm, find some chemistry, especially when you've got new players involved. I don't know North Dakota State's roster right now. I don't know how many returning starters they may have, who's going to leave early, who's going to stick around. But I do know that every single year North Dakota State's competitive. And North Dakota State, quite frankly, is not afraid of playing elite competition. So all I'm saying is that Oregon needs to be careful. They're not looking ahead to that. I know North Dakota State is not looking ahead to that. They've got a national championship to try to go win. The same can be said for Oregon. But next year, that is a game in week 1 that can be considered a major, major trap game. Just saying. Early thoughts on that? Way too early, but I like the enthusiasm. I like the question for it. It's never for analysts and for fans. It's never too early to look ahead. It's always fun to do that. Colin Dude 45, Michigan State's defense is pissed about having to constantly carry the team. Man, that could have been said for the past few years because Brian Lewerke or Rocky Lombardi or whoever you want to put in at quarterback for Michigan State is just absolutely awful. And now people are starting to call for Mark D'Antonio to get out of East Lansing, to leave the Spartans or for him to maybe be fired. And I think that's a little ridiculous. I think he's done so much for this Michigan State program. Took them to the playoffs a couple of years ago, for goodness sakes. I mean, good Lord. What was that, 2015 they did that? So he's 4 years removed from a playoff berth. And I know that was 4 years ago, and that Michigan State since then has expected to compete at an elite level. They haven't done that. But I agree, the defense is very angry because the offense can get nothing going. They're getting outscored. If you look at the numbers, they're averaging a little over 21 points per game. The defense is allowing a little over 25 points per game. So they're getting outscored if you just look at the stats. I know they've got Rutgers this week, and I know that you would love to see Rutgers, as would DM, get a win over Michigan State. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I am saying this. Rutgers managed to score 21 points against Ohio State. Ohio State's defense is better than Michigan State's defense. And all I'm saying is that 21 points in this game between Rutgers and Michigan State might be all it takes to win. So keep that in mind when you're watching football this Saturday. Mr. Cannoli, I will make an NFL playoff prediction video when the playoffs are set, which will be at the conclusion of December or the first week of January. I will come out there with the all handy-dandy whiteboard, and we will have the entire bracket drawn out, and we will be previewing the NFL playoffs from the wild card round to the Super Bowl. We will give you our predictions for all of those. So absolutely, we've done that the past few years. We don't talk NFL too much, but we will definitely make a playoff video for that. And then we'll make a Super Bowl video. Plenty of content for the NFL during playoff time, no doubt. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Let's see. Bryson Singley. Thoughts on Virginia Tech and bowl predictions for Virginia Tech? Maybe the Orange Bowl. Bryson, I hate to break it to you. I don't think the Orange Bowl is a possibility for Virginia Tech. It could be if they win out. They beat Pittsburgh and they beat Virginia. You're sitting at 9-3. You make the ACC title game. More than likely lose to Clemson, but Clemson would go to the championship game, to the college football playoffs. So there's a chance that Virginia Tech can make the Orange Bowl, sure. But that's a very tough task. To win out over Pittsburgh and Virginia is easier said than done. I think they do beat Pittsburgh. I do think they're going to win that game, and we said that in our Week 13 predictions that we posted today. I think Virginia Tech personally should be in the top 25. I had them at 25th. That's why I was surprised to see a team like Iowa State or USC get in instead of someone like Virginia Tech, A&M, or maybe even Pittsburgh, who's sitting at 7-3. But no, Orange Bowl is a possibility. I don't think they're going to get there, but once again, I've seen crazier things happen. I think they get past Pittsburgh. That game against Virginia will be very telling. But all I can say for this, Bryson, I'm sure you can agree. I'm sure Hunter Shin, if he's on here or if he watches later, can agree. He's a big-time Virginia Tech fan. I don't think anybody saw the Hokies sitting at 7-3 at this point in the season after the start that they had. After losing to Boston College, after getting annihilated by Duke, after, struggling mightily offensively, really not being able to find any success, I think sitting at 7-3 right now with a shot at 9-3 and a berth in the ACC title game, that's something no one expected. So credit to Justin Fuente and the job that he's doing, and credit to Bud Foster, man. His final year coaching with the Hokies, final game at Lane Stadium coming up this Saturday, very emotional time. Obviously, emotion's a huge part in college football. Yet you can't push them down. We forget sometimes that the guys out there on the field, they're humans too. They've got the emotions and they've got stories and they've got backgrounds and thoughts and feelings, just like we do. So we kind of forget about that. But I'm sure there's going to be a wide range of emotions going through Foster's head on Saturday, and a wide range of emotions for these players that came to play for him as well. And I do think they get the win there. So Orange Bowl, possibility, still there. ACC title, possibility, still there. But I've been very impressed with them over their past 6 or 7 games. And you asked that question a lot, Bryson, so I'm glad that I finally got to answer that for you. All right, skipping down here. Let me see. Corey Barber, you have a pretty good football mind. Would you ever consider taking a job with the Akron Zips as head coach? You know what? I tell you what. If Akron came to me right now and asked to become become head football coach, I'd take it in a heartbeat. I would take it in a heartbeat. If anybody came to me right now for a head coaching position or a coordinator position or just a position coach, I would take it in a heartbeat. So if you guys know anybody, some of these higher ups, and you're in desperate need of a coach, bring them my way because I'd love the opportunity. I don't think I'd be half bad. So I'll have to make sure to like that or have to find that comment. Remember that, Corey. And Deontay Armstrong, I've been wrong all year. I guess our records would say otherwise. We just got some salty fans on the line. That's all right. That's all right. Been wrong all year, he says. I love it. I love it. Ethan and Uncle Luke, if you're still on, those are the type of people I'm talking about. You'll run into people like that everywhere you go. But you can either let them get to you or you can just brush them aside. And that's what we always choose to do at the Gridiron Expert. Always take the high road. Johnny Bays, I guess you're heading out here in a second. So I see that. Make sure to like the stream, as many are saying, guys. We only got 18 likes, so make sure to keep smashing that like button. We really appreciate it. Josh Pruitt, good to have you here as well. Always happy to have you, even though you always are just quite the jokester when you come on. Let me see here. And we're caught up. Thank goodness. Wow. A lot of comments. You said so. If Georgia loses in a close game to LSU, do you think they will still have a chance in the playoffs? No. No, they will not. And I hate to say that for you Georgia fans out there, but they will not. They would have 2 losses at that point. And once again, one of them is against South Carolina, who might finish the season 4-8. I'm not dogging on Georgia. I'm just saying, even if they lost by 1 point to LSU, they would be the number 4 team. Let's say the number 4 team in the country. Number 1 LSU, number 4 Georgia in the SEC championship game. Georgia loses that game by 1. There's no way, in my opinion, you can put in a 2-loss Georgia team that did not win the SEC ahead of someone like Alabama, Oregon, Utah, Oklahoma, whoever comes out of that mix of teams. You could make a case for them, but 2 losses, I think that ends it, despite no matter how close that game to LSU is. And I think if it comes down to it, if they were even in consideration, that South Carolina loss would really, really hurt them. Really, really hurt them. Comic Dude 45, did I ever ask you what football position I played? Yes, a couple times, but back when I was playing, we had a very small team. We had a really, really, really small team, actually. So we played both ways. And players today, you even see, especially not as much at the college level, but sometimes in the high school level, you see players that play both ways. So I played sparingly, very, very sparingly, played quarterback. But my main position was more of a defensive tackle, defensive end. I did punt at times because I played soccer back in the day too, and I was the keeper. I was keeper in soccer, so you have to have a pretty good leg. If you watch soccer, you know that the goalies or the keepers have to have a decent leg to boot it down the field. So I played a little bit of that, and then that was mostly about it. That was mostly about my biggest thing. And personally, I mean, I love being on the offensive side of the ball. I love getting the opportunity to score. I've always said that if I ever got into coaching, I'm an offensive-minded coach, so I would try to put myself on that side of the ball. But I played on the defensive side of the ball a lot too, and I loved it. Loved every second of it. Being able to hit people and tackle, break through the line, tackles for losses. Never got an interception, but did have a couple fumble recoveries and plenty of tackles for losses. That was always a lot of fun. So I enjoyed it. I wish I was certainly not good enough to play in college, but that certainly would not stop me from coaching maybe one day at a college rank, because there are plenty of coaches out there that doesn't have any college playing experience that have done fairly well for themselves. Biggest example I can think of is Mike Leach. Guy was going to go become a lawyer and ends up being a head football coach that thrived at Texas Tech, and not maybe this year, but in the past few years has thrived as a coach at Washington State. Come be our offensive coordinator. You know what? You're there. You're there. You tell them, you tell everybody on the Rutgers campus that we got to get the gridiron expert to come coach Rutgers. I heard Greg Schiano might be coming back. If he's looking for an offensive coordinator, put in a good word for me. I would move up there in a heartbeat. Man, forget Arkansas State, man. I'll move up to New Jersey. I would do that in a heartbeat. All right, what else do we have here? The Best Savage, been loving the channel, a little disappointed in the Gators, but we got a good team. You absolutely do have a good team. And there's still a chance, I'll call you the Best Savage, that Florida can still get into a New Year's Six bowl game. I mean, they're sitting at number, 11 in the country. They went out. They're 10-2 once again. And that's what happened last year. And they got into they didn't go 10-2, 9-3, but they can get into the college football New Year's Six bowl game. Man, my mind's just bouncing around so much. I love it. I love it. Got so much going on. But yes, Florida's still in the hunt for a New Year's Six bowl game. Would have loved to have seen them maybe be in playoff contention at this point in the season, maybe winning the East, just to switch it up a little bit. But Dan Mullen's building something, man. He is building something. And I'm really, really excited. I'm not even a Florida fan. I'm just excited to kind of see him relevant again, kind of like the olden days under Tim Tebow and Urban Meyer and stuff like that. Because, once the Meyer era ended, Muschamp had a couple good years there. McElwain won 2 SEC East titles, but never could beat Alabama. And then obviously had that one horrible season. Mullen's the guy for the job. That's his dream job, and he deserves it. He is proving why he deserves it. Let's see what else we have here. DM, what team or teams with losing records are the most competitive against winning teams? That's a fantastic question. Let's just try to take a look here. I don't have all those in front of me right now, but which teams or teams with losing records are most competitive as of right now against teams with winning records? Let's go take a look at the handy dandy standings real quick. I'll tell you this, DM, one thing that you don't want to count out at first, right off the bat, first thing that pops up is an ACC standing. I'll give you one for each conference. How about that? A team with a losing record that maybe could compete against teams within their conference for the remainder of the year. Right now, out of the ACC, I'm looking more at a team like North Carolina, a team that's 4-6 right now, might not even make a bowl game, but how competitive they've been all year long. North Carolina under Matt Brown wins just a few of those games. Like the win over potentially Clemson. They only lost by 1. They narrowly lost to Pittsburgh this past week in overtime. So North Carolina, a team sitting at 4-6 right now, that the record should be so much better. They just weren't able to close out. That's what you have with a young team. Sometimes with a young team, you don't have a lot of you don't have enough experience or maturity to win those close games. And Matt Brown's building something. And I would be scared to play North Carolina for the rest of this year, and then certainly in 2020. In the Big 12, you look at a team with a losing record, DM, I'd say Texas Tech, although I will say West Virginia just is 4-6 right now, but just went on the road and beat Kansas State, who at the time was a nationally ranked team. And I know you're a Chris Kleiman supporter. I know you like Kansas State, so that was unfortunate to see. But they made a quarterback change. Neil Brown made a quarterback change, and it paid off for him. So West Virginia, Texas Tech, 2 teams at 4-6 that are competitive. In the Big 10, you look at a team more than likely out of the West that would be more competitive than someone in the East. I would say maybe Purdue, despite all the injuries, has been fairly competitive, 4-6. A lot of these teams are 4-6, but could hang in there. Same with Michigan State, just because of their defense alone. And Comic Dude 45 noted that. The offense can't do anything, but their defense alone can keep them in the games. And you get one lucky break, might be enough you need to win. You look at the Pac-12, a team that maybe has a losing record that can be competitive. I really like Colorado, sitting at 4-6 as well, a team that you don't want to overlook because of their offense. Laviska Shenault, and Stephen Montez, obviously some guys on the offensive side of the ball. Alex Fontenot as well at running back, a team that has beaten Arizona State, has been competitive, beat Stanford. So any week, Mel Tucker and his team could come through and get a win. And then in the SEC, a team with a losing record that could be competitive. That's really tough. I would have to say maybe Mississippi State sitting at 4-6. South Carolina sitting at 4-7. South Carolina's 4-7, but fourth in the SEC East. Let that sink in. 4-7 overall, but fourth in the SEC East because they're 3-5 in conference play and beat Kentucky, who's also 3-5, and they're only behind Tennessee's 3. Tennessee's 5-5, and they're third. Kind of shows you how weak the East was this year. Kentucky wasn't what they were cracked up to be. Missouri was a major disappointment. We knew Vanderbilt wasn't going to do much. South Carolina had the toughest schedule in the country. So, yeah, some wild stuff. So, DM, those are just a few teams for you from every Power 5 conference that, with losing records, could compete. Teams that you don't want to overlook. Records can be deceiving to the eye. Let's just make that. Records can be deceiving to the eye. You look at a team, we got a 9-1 team facing a 4-6 team. That 9-1 team is not going to win every time. They're just not. It's what makes college football so great. All right, what else do we have here? Johnny Bay has got the beginnings of a shootout between Ohio and Bowling Green. Go Bowling Green. They were on the schedule for Notre Dame when Notre Dame annihilated them at the time. So I'm going to have to turn it over here in a second to some midweek action here in a few minutes to catch the little bit of football that we have left, guys. I know we've got 2 weeks in the regular season left, conference championship weekend, and then bowl games, but it's going to be over before we know it. It's going to be gone as quickly as it came, and that sucks. Best to put it bluntly, that stinks. That's horrible. Horrible. But it is going to get fun real quick. The Marshall, 25-25. How do I feel about Notre Dame losing their sellout streak in the game against Navy? Is it really a big deal? I'll tell you what, the Marshall, that is something to ask for. Johnny Bay's a big Notre Dame fan, and Brody, who's not on the stream tonight, but comments quite a bit and is a big Notre Dame fan as well. To me, it's not a huge deal. I look at a team like Notre Dame or Nebraska that had that consecutive sellout streak and just think, what a great fan base. What a phenomenal fan base that regardless of how good the team is or how bad the team is, those fans showed up. Didn't matter who they were playing either. Some of these fan bases, guys, I tell you what, you got a team out there, they're playing Western Carolina. You think Alabama's going to sell out Bryant-Denny Stadium for the Western Carolina game? Not a chance. Not a chance. But Nebraska or Notre Dame would. So they lose it against Navy. I think it's interesting they lost it to Navy. Usually that's a good game to go to. But I don't think it's that big a deal. I think it's amazing that they went that long with it anyways. So all good things must come to an end. It was going to happen eventually. Now it's just time to start a new streak. That's the way I always like to look at it. Corey Barber, I appreciate the kind words. And I appreciate they look forward to the predictions, man. That means a lot. That really does mean a lot. I'm glad you really liking those. How does Utah bounce back next season after losing Tyler Huntley? Man, we knew coming into this season, Corey, that Utah was, if they wanted to win the Pac-12, if they wanted to win make the college football playoff, it was going to happen this year. The stars were aligned for that. Zach Moss was back. Huntley was back. The defense was going to be elite, and we knew that. And Utah's proving us right, sitting at number 7 in the country and really a Pac-12 title away, if they went out, from making the playoff. So how do they bounce back with losing their quarterback? Obviously, I think next year is going to be a year they're going to have to rely more on their run game, and in a year they're going to have to rely more on their defense. Huntley has been so good and so underrated as a dual threat quarterback. No one gives him enough credit. One of the better quarterbacks in the Pac-12, if you ask me. So losing him is going to be a huge blow, no doubt. So I think early on, obviously Kyle Whittingham's going to have to start breeding his quarterback for the future as soon as this season ends. But also in the first few weeks of the season, they are going to have to implement get him comfortable, but implement that running and buckle down with that defense. Utah and Kyle Whittingham's a team that, regardless of the talent that they have, whether they lose a lot or they have a lot coming back, to me, usually exceed expectations. So while you hate to lose a player of the caliber of Tyler Huntley, I wouldn't be too worried about it. All right, last couple of questions here, guys, before we start wrapping things up. But I'm looking here. Johnny Bay's Notre Dame's New Year's Six chances, very high. Very high. Committee doesn't think so, sitting at number 16 in the country. But how can you leave out what would it be, a 10-2 Notre Dame team with their only losses coming to Michigan and Georgia? How can you leave that Notre Dame team out of a New Year's Six bowl game? I think there's a very good chance that Notre Dame gets to a New Year's Six bowl game and plays the likes of the Group of Five champion in the Cotton Bowl. I think that's possible. I think that's very possible. I think they're high. I think the committee snubbed them this week. I think they're a little too low, coming in at number 16. So I think Notre Dame has a very good chance of making a New Year's Six bowl game this year, assuming they win out. They've got to take care of business the rest of the season. They got Boston College and then Stanford. Win both of those, you're 10-2. Neither of those two teams elite, but nonetheless should be enough to get that. I'd be shocked if they missed out at 10-2. Emperor of Rome. I love the trivia. Speaking of winless teams, Duke has gone winless 4 times. Wow. Oh, I feel for the Duke fans. Good Lord, 2000 and 2001. You go 2 straight years of winning 0 games. What was that, 0-24? 0-24 between 2000 and 2001? That is terrible. That's shocking. I did not know that. I did not know that they had 4, within 10 years, they have 4 seasons of winless teams. 40% of their seasons from 96 to 2006 were winless. David Cutcliffe was absolutely the right man for the job then. It's kind of revived that Blue Devils football program, but you're right, definitely a basketball school. Couldn't get the job done last year with old Zion and the Big Three, but with Kentucky not looking too hot this year, struggling early on, maybe they can do it in 2019. Let's take a look here. Final couple of comments here. I saw one. I'm going to just steal that idea, if that's fine with you, Johnny. I'm going to go ahead and scribble that down because I know, obviously, a lot of you guys watch a lot of college football analysts out there, myself, Mark Rogers, SG1, Uncle Lou, whoever it may be, and we all know each other as well. So I think that's a brilliant idea. And I think, if we put something together that people seem to like, maybe get a little exposure, maybe make the committee wake up a little bit. Who knows what can happen? One tiny thing, it takes off, turns into something huge. So criteria, vote, average, and now you got a real top 25. I love it. That's a fantastic idea. All right. Cyclone Mitch, Texas A&M could meet Iowa State in the Texas Bowl. That would be a phenomenal bowl game, Mitch. I tell you what, 2 former Big 12 schools. When bowl games are sending out their bids to their respective programs, wanting them to come play in their bowl game, they are looking for intriguing matchups. They're looking for former conference matchups. They're looking for rivalry games. I know many people would love to see like Texas A&M and Texas. I think they would try to find a way to do that first. And if that's not possible, then Texas A&M and Iowa State in the Texas Bowl would be phenomenal. 2 former conference rivals meeting up in a bowl game. But very deep, not a horrible drive or horrible travel for either team. Obviously, more so for Iowa State than Texas A&M, but that would be a great bowl game. I firmly agree. I think that would have the potential to be one of the better and more anticipated bowl games of this postseason. Stewie, do I think the A&M could beat Georgia this week? Here's the thing. I'm not ruling it out. If South Carolina can do it, and South Carolina is a team that just lost 30-6 to Texas A&M, if South Carolina can do it, Texas A&M can do it. Because Texas A&M, I would have said this a month ago or 2 months ago, is better than South Carolina. They are, plain and simple. And so I look at that, and I think if the way South Carolina won that game over Georgia was from their defense. Will Muschamp had a phenomenal plan. They got pressure on Jake Fromm. They forced turnovers, and they took advantage of them. South Carolina could have scored more points off of those turnovers. If Texas A&M does that, they will score points off of those turnovers. They will. Keep in mind, Ryan Helinski was out for that game. Got injured in that game against Georgia, and they still managed to win. I don't think they lose this game. I don't think Georgia loses this game. I think they're peaking at the right time. Huge win over Auburn, huge win over Florida. And that defense, to me, continues to get better every week. So I don't know if A&M could get much offensive production, but I'm not ruling it out. I am absolutely not ruling it out as a potential upset. And that would just be the type of thing that A&M would go do just to create chaos in the College Football Playoff Committee, just to create chaos in all of college football. Because now Georgia's out if they lose to A&M. So now you've got Bama would slide up there. Oregon would slide up there. You know Georgia's not even in the running anymore. And then if Oregon, I saw someone mention earlier, Oregon's on upset alert at Arizona State. If Oregon loses and then beat Utah in the Pac-12 championship, well, the Pac-12's not getting in. Then Georgia's not getting in. And now you've got to decide, do you put in a one-loss Alabama or do you put in a maybe one-loss Oklahoma team? Then imagine if Oklahoma didn't get – I mean, there's so much that could happen between now and Selection Sunday that would make it just so chaotic in the playoff selection room, among the committee, and just in the world of college football. And while some people don't want that to happen, I do. I would love to see some chaos. And all I can say is this: at the very beginning of the season, before we started doing live streams, before we started cranking out videos left and right, we said, this is the 150th year of college football. What's going to happen to make it different? I felt like something was going to be different. And everybody was getting tired. I'm tired of Clemson. I'm tired of Alabama. Let's see something different. And now you look at it, and you've got LSU, who I'm not going to say came out of nowhere because there were very high expectations coming out of Baton Rouge this season. But LSU's in there. Alabama might not even get in. Clemson has shown signs of weakness. Ohio State is looking like the most complete team in the country. You've got a team like Baylor and Minnesota and Oregon and Utah that are all legitimate college football playoff contenders and might win their conferences this year, something that I don't think many thought was going to happen before the 2019 season started. This year of college football has been absolutely amazing. Not as crazy as the 2007 season. If you don't know much about that, go look it up. There's a great video on YouTube, like 40 minutes long, that highlights everything that happened that season. So not as crazy as 2007, but still, in my opinion, it's up there. And then last question here, Cole Converse, am I okay with a 6-4 team being in the top 25? And Stewie, absolutely. Always happy to answer your questions, man. Happy to answer all of your questions. But Cole, last question, am I okay with that 6-4 team being in the top 25? Cole, earlier, I addressed that. I said I didn't agree with Iowa State or USC being in the top 25, especially not at 22 or 23. But I do understand why the committee put Iowa State in. I do understand why the committee ranked the Cyclones up there. Very, very narrow losses to Iowa, who just beat Minnesota, to Oklahoma, who just beat Baylor. They beat Texas, who at the time was number 19. They narrowly lost to Baylor, narrowly lost to Oklahoma State. So out of those 4 losses, they've all been one-possession games, and you just can't help but think what could have been for Iowa State. But the win over Texas was solid. Texas was too highly ranked to begin with, but they beat the number 19 team in the country. And Iowa State is a good football team, and they've shown that. So I like Iowa State coming in at 22. I don't know if I wouldn't have ranked them there. I would have put a 7-3 team in like Virginia Tech or Texas A&M. But I understand why they did it, so therefore I'm not entirely furious about it. Past couple of weeks I have been furious and I've disagreed greatly. But guys, there you have it. Your Week 13 College Football Playoff Top 25. New set of rankings are out, and it seems that the committee finally got it right. For now. Finally figure something out. Finally put out a solid group and a solid set of rankings. Can they keep it up? That is the million-dollar question. Can they keep it up? Will they do this again next week? Will they do it the week after the season finale? Will they do it on Selection Sunday? Of course, the time that it matters the most. But for right now, we can all enjoy and go to bed and sleep well knowing that the committee finally figured something out, finally did something good, and we can breathe a little bit going into this Saturday of college football. So, guys, thank you so much for watching us here on this live stream. Once again, I appreciate every single one of y'all's support. Mark TR, thank you. Stewie, I'm glad that you like the live streams. I really appreciate that. Haven't seen you before on one of these, so thank you for joining us. Thank you for your comments and your questions. Always happy to answer. Cole Converse, appreciate that, sir. Always appreciate your support and your comments on the videos. Johnny Bays, peace to you. Everybody else, have a fantastic rest of the night. Thank you for watching once again. Check out the rest of the content coming out this week, and let's get ready for Week 13 of college football. Thank you all once again, and have a great rest of the night.